one has way too much sugar. So sugar's not toxic. A lot of the hype on that is incorrect, but we do have way too much of it. There was a recent study that showed that kids are having 3 snacks a day. Adults aren't much better. So in terms of reducing risk, switch from full-fat cola to diet colas, treats and stuff like that, so having chocolates and cakes, that really should just be once or twice a week. That isn't necessarily anything people should have every day. We all have way more calories than we think we have. We have a snacking culture. Even in conferences and amongst educated people or office workers, someone has a birthday, you have donuts. Someone graduates, you have cake. Someone's getting married, you have some more cake. Coffee and tea, you can have 400 calories in a coffee quite easily. So those are kind of low-hanging fruits. Just stick to a plain coffee, a plain tea. Think about whether they need the snack. Could they have a tea instead of having a donut, that sort of thing. Make sure your veggies take up half a plate, and I'll show you a useful tool. In alcohol, some studies show that 1/5 of people's calories come from alcohol, and people forget about it. So that could be 400, 500, 700 calories a day from alcohol. So you don't want to necessarily encourage this, but if someone is having 3 or 4 beers, that could be 700 calories. If they had a spirit and a diet mixer, that could be about 120 calories. So you can massively reduce your risk, or the calories you're eating. Easy ways to give advice. I think low carbohydrate advice is really easy to give in primary care, because all you've got to say is, here's a diet sheet, here's bread, potatoes, cereal, etc., etc. Just try and avoid these, and you will naturally reduce your calorie intake and reduce your weight and reduce your risk. It's quite simple advice to give. From my experience with patients as well, it's easier when you're eating out. Because if you're trying to reduce calories and you've got to go to a restaurant and say, oh, can I have slightly less of the rice, less of the main course, less of this, a smaller version of this, it's quite complicated. Go to a restaurant and say, can I have that dish, but no rice? It's quite an easy thing to deal with and be sociable. And generally, I give to patients, because it's really easy to explain, is a plate like this and say, this is what a plate should look like. So whether you're having spaghetti bolognese, curry, or whatever it is, your veggies should be half a plate. And that can reduce calorie intake by about 400 calories per meal for some people. And so I think that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nicola. That was absolutely great. Questions?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. That was absolutely fantastic. The Hollingsworth study.
Yes.
Was really kind of interesting study. So presumably, I missed the sort of sample size, and presumably quite small. And is it 6 months?
Oh, so this is the very low calorie diet, yes.
Yeah.
Well, so they have several. The first study was 12 people. It was uncontrolled, so there was no control group. They then went on to do a larger study where they compared a very low calorie diet to surgery. That was about 20 people, but the direct study that just came out that was published in The Lancet, they had about 200 people. So I think it was 140 maybe that completed.
Oh, sorry, no, I meant the other study, I think.
Let me get to the one. So the one on the first phase insulin response?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so that's the very low calorie diet.
This one, yeah.
Yeah, so this is exactly the same thing. The protocol was exactly the same. Yeah, it was testing a very low calorie diet on remission of type 2, and Roy Taylor has a particular interest in the first phase response. Ooh, it's a great question. Yeah, so the very first study they did, it was 600 calories for 10 weeks. They then did a study that was moving on to 800 calories a day for a month, and the recent study was basically a very low calorie diet for however long it took to get to a 15% weight loss. So this was a cracking amount of weight loss. They lost like 13, 15 kilograms. They've managed to maintain that weight so far for a year, but we know that they're going to regain it. But the real interest for me, or in terms of the science, is does restoration of that insulin response mean that even if they regain a bit of weight, do they stay in remission of type 2? Because that's what the data suggests, that if you, like I said, that's why I bored everyone with the physiology, but if you get that first phase insulin response coming back, because that's normal physiology, do you help people stay in remission for longer? So that's the real question. So the data, they have follow-up data at 2 to 3 years and we'll know.
Nicola, can I just point out the direct study? So what they did was they actually offered the study to 1,500 people. Only 300 took it up. So So it's not for everyone. And the
Oh, totally. Yes,
the
yes.
300 that took it up are clearly very special people.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They actually stuck to the protocol for, as you say, 3 to 4 months. So it wasn't 800 kilocalories for a month. It was 3 to 4 months.
Yeah. So it's about
and it was sort of these diet replacement. It was a Cambridge type
yes.
Diet replacement.
Yes.
And they lost a mean of 15 kilos but regained 5. But the amazing thing was 46% remission rate in diabetes. That was the amazing thing, was that actually 46% of them had remission of diabetes at 1 year.
So I do think that's amazing, but actually I think the real lesson from that is what was the predictor of remission wasn't necessarily the weight loss. The weight loss itself, you could lose 14 kilograms and not get remission. The prediction of the remission was the first phase response. But what I will say, so in terms of the direct, they were a lot more moderate. They were a lot more real world. So like I said, they did a low calorie diet for as long as it took to get to the 15 kg weight loss. And they had a very low calorie diet, but they enabled people to like have extra things in their diets, go to weddings and enjoy themselves, etc. But I will say, no one really knows how much weight you need to lose or how quickly, because there are studies where they have 7 days of a very low calorie diet. So 7 days of a very low calorie diet, you lose about 1.5 kilos, nothing special, but you seem to get the same response. So what might be the case is people might be able to go on a really extreme diet for 3 weeks and actually get some of the same effects. But I will emphasize what you said, it's not for everyone at all. It's really hardcore. Following a very low calorie diet, losing that weight is hardcore. But I think we should have, in some ways, more faith in our patients. Because 10 years ago, if you said very low calorie diet, don't bother, it won't work. And actually, they showed that it can in many people.
Reading the direct study, it's not generalisable to our population because it's 98% white in that study, whereas
Yes.
ours is probably 98% minority. Do we know whether the first phase insulin response is ethically biased, or does it work the same across them?
Oh, really good question. So as far as I know, in South Asians, there should be no differences in responses. There is some evidence of people of African ethnicity that there are differences in the first phase response that I think Sarah knows more about. But actually, it's such a good question. And actually, Michaeline has said we have to find out whether this works in different ethnicities. I think what would be nice is, for me, because I used to work in Newham for 3 years, and if I said to any of my patients from Bangladesh or whatever, and said, go on this Cambridge diet, these shakes, it's so anathema to what people normally eat. But actually having a dietary-based, very low-calorie diet with foods they eat, but reducing the calories, who knows what that would do.
And I think you're right to pick up on that, because I think also, particularly, our patients are changing, and some of the younger generations that we see are very different in their dietary behaviours to their parents. And I think, as you really well highlighted, we're doing them a disservice by not at least considering these kind of options, which I think, in the past may have been thought to be too extreme, but now are an option for some people. One other thing just to highlight about the direct study is it was delivered in primary care, which was, I think, one of the real merits of that study. It is still a trial, and it's got, as I started the day off with, it is still, it's more about efficacy than effectiveness. But this work will, I'm sure, be scaled up in a much more practical primary care delivery kind of setting, which is going to be really exciting.
Mm.
There were lots of questions. Over.
Oh yeah, got a few friends, sort of alternative and vegan type friends, who keep on banging on about a documentary called What the Hell. Have you come across that? One of the claims it makes is that it's basically cherry picked lots of studies, but it says diabetes isn't caused by sugar and carbohydrates, it's caused by processed meats and things. I just wondered if you had any
scathing put downs. I actually can't really watch documentaries or any TV shows on diet. It just makes my blood pressure go up. There's really the only evidence, and it's tiny, that red meat causes type 2 comes from long-term epidemiological studies, and it's probably just confounding. And even if it does, it's probably only at super high intakes, and even then the effect size, the actual impact is tiny. So I would think, no, there's no reason to think that processed meat at all causes type 2.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point. I mean, there is a strong epidemiological basis behind higher meat consumption and particularly processed and cancer. But actually, probably a stronger risk factor for developing cancer is being obese
Yes.
and having type 2 diabetes.
Yes.
So, and that's why I have to personalise all this. And that's, for me, the strongest message of all of this is there is no right answer. There's no one way to do this. You've got to get comfortable with discussing diet with your patients, and you've got to personalise what advice you give. Lots more questions.
Hi, I work in public health, and we do a lot of with area I work in, we do a lot of stuff around sugar and Sugar Smart campaign. And I think obviously people running this, public health people, are not necessarily expert in nutrition. And we get a lot of messages and sort of support campaigns around sugar, and maybe it's a timing thing that sort of happens at the same time as an increased awareness of diabetes and diabetes prevention. But I've kind of got the impression that sugar was a big risk factor for diabetes too, independently of weight. I know the weight most important, but I kind of got the impression that sugar was an independent risk factor for diabetes.
Yeah.
Blood glucose, and that sounds like sugar to a normal.
Oh, yeah. God, I could talk for the, yeah. This is what, I think this is so interesting, and this thing about nutritional science is how complex it is. So if we think about sugar being good or bad or causing or not, a lot of it is about the dose. So there is very good data from controlled trials showing if you get like a quarter of your calories a day from sucrose, particularly liquid sucrose, we know that causes some insulin resistance in the muscle, and it also is associated with liver fat deposition. There is another study where they gave a litre a day of Coca-Cola, and the same thing happened. So certainly at really high intakes, I mean, it's just a bad idea anyway for your teeth, but certainly there's some evidence there at really high intakes it causes it. There's some epidemiological data that also suggests that if it drinks sucrose in liquid causes type 2 independence of weight gain. So I actually fully support any anti-sugar campaigns. I think even where the evidence might be a little bit weak, let's err on the side of caution. We are all having too much. In the US, some adolescents get a quarter to 30% of their calories from Coke. Like, that's bad, however you look at it. So.
And even if the evidence that sucrose itself is not the direct cause, the major problem is it is calories. Okay?
And it's delicious and we like eating a lot.
And it's addictive and it's all those kind of things.
I think where that's slightly difficult though is if you're sort of, if people are asking you whether they should be choosing this or this, and that's low calorie and that's low calorie but high sugar.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
yogurt. Okay, yogurt is the biggest problem there, isn't it? How many people are taking low-fat yogurts, thinking they're being healthy,
Yeah.
and the sugar content in those is enormous.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's tricky, isn't it?
Hi, thanks very much for your talk. I just wondered whether you know anything about the microbiome in obesity, because there's more that's been talked about that sometimes I wonder if the future of obesity and managing it is going to be addressing our gut health.
So my short answer is no. So it's certainly really interesting. There's a really fascinating association between our gut microbiome and obesity and type 2. It's so complex that, I mean, even if we were able to, we are 50 years away of having useful interventions. You know, people say, oh, this type of bacteria causes obesity. We're not even there yet. Take this kind of probiotic and improve your bacteria. We're not there yet. There was a recent study there where they even did a fecal transplant. Why would you do that? I don't know. Some people are desperate to wear, and that didn't work. So everyone thought, oh, that's going to help people lose weight. Didn't work. So it's involved in a lot of health, but health like no way compared to everything else. No, it's a tiny, tiny part of the pie.
Any other questions?
Sorry, I was just thinking, do you perceive any problems with having too many diet drinks?
So my advice with that, so some of any evidence that we have that they're not great comes mostly from animal studies and very poorly done functional MRI human studies. My advice would be, if someone's having Coke, have diet, but if they're not having Diet Coke, don't start. Water's the best thing, tea's the best thing. But if someone's having, 300 calories a day from Coke, reduce it to Diet Coke, because as Sarah said, whatever the small parts of red meat or Diet Coke are, your weight gain and your weight is a bigger risk factor for any of these things anyway.
On a practical level, there's very low calorie diets, and you mentioned you thought that general practice was the place to give advice about that. How would you practically give advice
Oh, that is a really, really good question. So let me just recharacterize slightly what I said. I don't think we should necessarily, it should be led by primary care, but I think we should be getting to the point where we are able to give that option in primary care. As far as how to give that advice, that is such a good question. Now, I work with the Royal College of General Practitioners, and we are trying to help GPs give nutritional-based advice. And actually, we are trying to figure out how we can maybe put tools online for GPs to give their patients. I actually would like food-based approaches, so even maybe diet sheets of this is what you normally eat, try eating this as a menu, or even slightly cheaper options for very low-calorie diets for the person themselves to purchase. Because if you think about it, yes, they are expensive, and you can find some cheaper kind of milkshakey type ones, but if that's all you're eating and you're replacing food, potentially it wouldn't need to be any more costly than what your normal dietary intake would be. But we are trying to work on that at a practical level. For GPs and for patients as well.
So it's a watch this space.
Watch this space, yes. Yes, a very good question, thank you.
Can I just ask about Weight Watchers, Slimming World, all those kind of things?
Yep.
Generally a good thing? Generally a waste of money?
Definitely a really good thing if people like that. There's no one way. Some people can do it absolutely on their own. Some people are militant about it and that's the way they need to be. Some people just have to avoid foods completely. Other people need social support, so Weight Watchers and Slimmers World can be great because you go there, you have the social support, you get advice, you're being checked. Monitoring is really important behaviour. So I think Sonia nicely said about physical activity and how do you keep it going. And self-monitoring is a really good way of doing it. Having people keep a diary of what they're eating, keep a diary of weight loss has been shown to help long-term weight maintenance as well.
What's the views on Orlistat and diabetes prevention?
Orlistat doesn't do anything special for preventing type 2 apart from the fact to the degree that it helps weight loss. Yeah.
And I think probably our experience of Orlistat is it's a very small minority of people that tolerate it, but for those people it's very useful. So I certainly forget to offer it, and I think we should still offer it, but understand that it's probably 10% of people that tolerate it. Last one, and then we shall have a snack-free break.
Sorry, everyone.
Can I just ask about intermittent fasting and the 5-2 diet?
Yeah. Ooh. Is that a drill? That's a no. I don't know. Maybe need to go out. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Can I grab that out? I shouldn't really, when there's a fire, we shouldn't be prioritising.
Of course we should. Is it a test? Oh, great, thank you.
Oh.
God, you give a lot of talks.
Oh, I know, yeah.
Hopefully that means they're very quick to prepare.
Not too bad at all. Prevention of type 2 now is fairly all right.
Right, did you finish that question?
No, I didn't.
No. 5-2 and then break.
So 5-2, no better than any other calorie restriction diet in preventing type 2, but it can be an easy way for people to lose weight if it works for them. It doesn't do anything special as far as we know.
Fantastic. So 15 minutes. Let's come back at 11:30. I really recommend having a nice brisk walk outside. Slightly
Hello, how are you?
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
I saw your name and I was like, oh,
Yay.
nice to meet you.
Oh, blimey. Oh, I'd love to be a fly on the wall there.
It was mostly my facial expressions that needed controlling.
Well, I'm on a group with Nicola, and it's a mansplaining meeting, a man-interrupting meeting. It's quite good to have you there. Well, you get the worst.
I need to get that back.
Yeah, lovely to see you. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate
Nice
it.
to see your talk.
Oh God. Well,
I've set the
it's
scene
nothing I
already. In
haven't.
fact, we've both set the scene by kind of slightly digging about DPP.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, well, it's interesting. So I've sort of shifted quite a bit in my focus now.
Yeah.
thinking much more sociological, social determinants of health. Yeah. I know, I'm waiting for when she's going to say about history thing.
What do you